international agencies, mostly JWT and DDB. And then I moved to the States to work at a Hispanic shop called LatinWorks in Austin. After some years there, I moved around. I was lucky enough to be able to work in general market and not only Hispanic, mainly at VML in Kansas City, which was a great experience for me. I moved around a little bit, and now because of COVID mainly, I'm lucky enough to be back home in Austin at this small shop called Bakery, which was named one of the best small agencies to work at by Advertising Age this year. So that's a little bit about me. I've been doing this for 14 years now, I think. That's quite a bit. I'm really old.
So the age of a teenager.
Yeah, that's an awful thing to say out loud, but yeah, that's the truth. Yeah, I've been working this for a teenager, and I mostly love it. I think it's a very beautiful business that has for sure changed quite a bit since I started until now. Yeah, I mean, when I started, we were still shooting TV spots on film, and you would like meet with a director and he would say, hey, maybe we can do this digitally. And you were like, no, come on. We need to shoot this on 35 millimeters. So yeah, things have changed quite a bit. Yes. Mostly for good, I think.
We were kind of talking about this. I was your age when I met you. And now you know, time flies. Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit more about your role at Bakery?
Of course, I am a creative director. We're a small shop, so I basically manage a small creative team composed of copywriters and art directors. So I'm the guy who tells them, hey, this is good and this is bad. I try to be as constructive as I can and say, hey, this is good because of this or bad because of this. I also handle most of client relationships, so presentations and stuff. I was a post-COVID hire, which is really weird because I haven't met any of these people like in person. And so yeah, great new world. I need to build relationships with a team over Zoom and Slack, which has been a fun challenge for sure.
Yeah. So you weren't always a creative director. You were
I started off as a copywriter. I'm a copywriter by trade. In basically 90% of the agencies I've ever worked at, they pair copywriters with art directors. So I've had a couple of very long-lasting, in Spanish we call them duplas. In English, it's probably your partner, which is a copywriter art director team, which in my head is for sure the ideal way to work. I think I couldn't have come this far without great art directors by my side to bring everything to life.
Could you talk a little bit about each of those two roles as jobs? Like why do we need two different people to create an ad?
Sure. It's probably a little bit of old school, but sorry, that's a baby that I need to sorry, that's some work right now. He's been listening to it, enjoying the chat so far. But yeah, the roles. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit old school, but back in the day, you would probably come from two different disciplines, and you would either be like trained in writing and very focused on that, or trained in design and art direction and be very focused on that. That's pretty old school. I think as time went by, those roles have become a little bit more multidisciplinary. Like it's really hard today to find a young 20-something copywriter who doesn't know like basic Photoshop, and it's really hard to find an art director and don't expect him to like write some stuff up. It's become a little bit more intertwined, I think, which is a great thing. So normally I'm old school. I've been doing this for a while. I would write most of the stuff. I would like, the process would be, I would get a brief with an assignment for a TV spot or a campaign. I would then go off with my partner. We would think out loud for a while, come up with ideas. And once those are done, I would probably sit down and write them. I would concentrate mostly on language and on taglines and on making everything sound cool. And then I would pass it on to my art director partner, and he would bring it to life somehow with the magic of Photoshop most of the time.
You know, traditionally these were two very different mindsets, perhaps different training.
Yeah, for sure.
Could you describe sort of why it's important to be able to communicate an idea with somebody who might have a different background?
Well, because you're both in charge of making it true. And I come from a film background of sorts. I'm mostly focused on film. I am very focused on language and syntax and how film or plastic art and all that stuff is a language with grammatical rules on itself. And that's kind of the language that both an art director and a copywriter need to share in common. Like, I probably am better at writing a tagline than an art director, and an art director is probably better at like making a beautiful layout for a print ad. But there's a point in language where we need to be speaking the same thing, and that's the syntax I'm talking about. If we're shooting a TV spot, and I suggest that we do a traveling shot or a zoom, and my art director partner knows exactly what I'm talking about and what that zoom might communicate in the story that we're telling. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. Which I think kind of gets us to the issue or the subject of medium.
Sure.
Right. And I think you have some slides for us.
Yeah, it's pretty rough because, again, I'm not an art director and I didn't have my art director partner here to beautify a fantastic looking deck. So
you should have gotten an intern to do this.
This is 2020, Don Javier. People don't do that anymore. This is not 1999. Interns work and learn stuff. They are not slaves. So when you guys become interns, don't let anyone send you up for coffee or anything. And this is the wrong side, sorry. So yeah, throughout my career, I've mostly prided myself on being very analytical of the advertising language. And I've given some classes in college, and I've written some notes on some magazines, and I really enjoy analyzing advertising as its own language. And advertising as its own language is a craft that has heavily borrowed from the medium where it lives. And it's one of the few instances of that. If we're doing advertising on TV, for example, there's a long tradition of the ad imitating the art. So if we go way back to I Love Lucy, and I encourage you guys to do this. If you watch I Love Lucy and you watch some ads of the time, the transition is very seamless.
Is everybody familiar with the I Love Lucy? Hopefully.
Yeah.
I mean,
Nickelodeon late at night reruns and stuff like that.
No one here is old enough to have watched I Love Lucy by chance. You're either a hardcore fan of old-time TV or just this pop culture osmosis. But it's interesting because it's I Love Lucy was one of the first shows that was heavily advertised on, like in a time where TV was kind of the Wild West. Advertisers like really grabbed into I Love Lucy as a show and started advertising there. And again, the transition was pretty seamless. Advertisers very early on figured out that you want the ad to kind of live side by side with what people are actually watching because they want to. And make the transition pretty seamless. So when you're watching TV, and that's another thing that feels pretty old now. I mean, with streaming services and stuff, there's no longer more ad breaks. Like people rarely stop a show and watch commercials. But back in the day, it used to be that your ad should probably mimic language-wise what was happening on screen, and that means, hey, if you're watching a comedy show, some of those comedy tropes would normally translate to what you're seeing on the ad so that people won't break away and you keep their attention. And this happens all throughout the advertising medium, which is what I like about it. It always cribs its language from something else. So when you're doing a print ad or you're doing a big billboard, you'll have like all these art directors going way back to the most like primitive rules of graphic art and composition to bring stuff to life. Stuff like this, in which you're basically taking all the cues from traditional art and turning it into a new message, which is, I think, pretty lovely in this case. This is a print ad that I particularly love, which basically says that if you're a kid playing with Legos, you're God or something, because you can create, which I think is lovely. So yeah, artists and advertising have been intertwined for a very long time. Writers as famous as Gabriel Garcia Marquez or Ernest Hemingway did copywriting jobs at advertising agencies, or Dali did design work on the side. Chupa Chups is a very famous lollipop brand in Spain, and they pride themselves because Dali made the logo. So that's part of what I love about advertising. It has always like worked hand in hand with the arts, which is lovely. And that kind of takes us to where advertising is now and how it has changed with the arrival of the internet. And I'm always very curious about how this theory about advertising always kind of stealing language from the medium where it lives has come to life in the digital age. Any questions so far? Should I keep going?
Yes.
So
they will all give you a thumbs up if they have. You should continue.
So that brings us to what our brands are doing right now, which is, hey, they're mimicking the medium once again. So yeah, in a world where medium is Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and that's what has people's attentions, we now have brands trying to mimic that language, and some do very successfully and some don't. Here's a very clear example. Wendy's is for many years considered the Twitter winner. It's I had a chance to work with the team who manages a Twitter account, and they make it look so easily on Twitter, but honestly, it's a 15-person crew making sure that when they're playing on this medium, which is Twitter, they sound authentic, because users are very, very smart at identifying when a brand sounds authentic or when they're just trying to be like hip. And Wendy does a great job. I don't know how many of you guys are on Twitter and how many of you guys follow the brand, but they're basically like showing the way of how it's done. And that's, for me, it's a very nice example of, hey, let's take this language, let's use the language people use on Twitter and make it our own.
Can you have it has to be, I'm imagining the marketing strategy has to be very nimble in this scenario?
It has to be very nimble. That's one of the things that have changed. They basically have someone from the brand side, from the client side, on hold all time, who needs to review everything like on a snap. Like if something's happening online, they want to react to it very quickly. They cannot post it without permission, but they do have someone on a call all the time. They can ask, hey, we want to post it, and he gives them the red or green light to do so.
Hopefully with a sense of humor, at least.
It's imperative to have a sense of humor in that role, I think. So yeah, most brands do this pretty well. They see something online like the 10-year challenge, and they say, hey, how can we hop on this and do something fun on this? So yeah, I recently, it feels like memes have become this language, which is really funny because after many years of tradition in which you need like this talented craftsman to come up with ads, you now have people who need to be very smart to mimic what normal users are doing. People who don't have like this big like education on writing or on illustrating, and you need to see what they're doing and what's clicking and what's keeping people entertained and mimic that in a way that feels like you're part of the conversation and not this old man outside trying to. I always think of this like Steve Buscemi gif, "Hello, fellow kids," from, what was that? You probably know the one, hopefully.
Wait, what about Steve Buscemi?
You know, that gif, "Hello, fellow kids," and he's dressed as a teenager, trying to pass as a teenager.
I'm too...
You're not online enough.
No.
He says, how do you do, fellow kids, but it's him like holding a skateboard or something.
Yeah, he's trying too hard to be hip.
Thank you, Lizzie.
And that's something that brands are very easily, it's a trap that brands can very easily fall to. This is a very simple Dennis example. It's very, I don't know how many of you were on Twitter when the 10-year challenge happened, but it had its moment. And this, for me, is an example of a brand that says, hey, very easily we can join this conversation and at the same time say something about our brand, which is, hey, we've been here for 10 years and we haven't changed at all. It's the old Dennis that you love. But then there's examples of brands that really force themselves into this online conversation. We all know that tasty is a huge thing. It's been around for a while, but people don't get tired of it. It's always nice to be scrolling and in between horrible news find some piece of lovely made food. People still enjoy it. It's still big. It still gets clicks. And of course, they want to sell, and brands want part of it. So I was looking for some random examples, and I came upon this. Like, this is a paid ad for Bud Light and a product that they launched called Rattler. And I can imagine perfectly creatives like breaking, like going crazy, imagining how they can partner with something like Tasty, and they came up with beer bread French toast, which I don't know, it feels like terribly forced to me. Of course, they don't share their data, but I'm willing to bet very few people went out and made this, or it prompted no one to actually buy a Bud Light Radler, especially not to make this. So yeah, you'll find very much a lot of examples of brands trying to like incorporate themselves into this language, and sometimes being successful and sometimes being a little bit more forced. And sometimes if you're someone like BarkBox, where you deal with dogs all the time, it becomes so easy. I mean, people are doing this on their own. They just need to add their brand to it. For me, this is an example of a meme that it's pretty ownable by a brand that can use dogs because it goes with the brand. So in some cases, you'll find brands that very seamlessly integrate into the conversation online. But you can also find horrible stuff like this, which makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, the basketball player is not a thing. It has never been a huge meme. Slim Jim here tries to do something, which is they take that aesthetic given by the meme type, and they think they can basically say anything, but this makes no sense. I mean, if you're scrolling online and you see this is not funny, this is not a moment, and this is not a true meme. So it's very easy when you're trying to kind of join a conversation to make this, which for me, it's only noise and it's completely worthless.
Yeah. So it seems that the creative, and especially maybe in these kinds of brand executions, the people are responsible, the public is responsible for creating taste or creating visual culture.
The public, I think, yeah, absolutely right. I think there's no longer a very strict line between public and content. It's users. It's all users consuming and creating content.
So as a creative director, copywriter, is there any room for these sort of higher culture type of things?
I think there still is. I think it's still important to kind of know the basics. I can tell you for sure that the people doing this very well, like the Wendy's people, they don't simply like get on Twitter and tweet. There's research, there's data, there's a very academic process to it, and to do it well. And for me, that's the difference between some of the first examples and something like this, where it's someone just thinking it's easy because people do it on their own all the time, which is not the case.
Have you thought of a process to make sure that maybe the people you hire or that you look for in your team are able to switch between lowbrow and highbrow thinking, or is there a secret to that?
I'm not sure they need to switch. I think they need to feed the lowbrow with the highbrow, if that makes sense.
I think it does. Also, you've mentioned that you are pretty, I think in your bio, it even says that you're a former, you mentioned TV, you're a TV and cinema critic.
Yeah, my background is definitely on film. That's a little bit of how I started before I made the jump to advertising as a whole. I think there was a point in my career that I wanted to be sort of a filmmaker, but I still wanted to make money, and advertising is a good way to accomplish that, I guess.
Yeah. Is that still relevant, you think?
For sure. Especially right now, I wouldn't call myself a TikTok user. I'm definitely a big TikTok watcher. I'm pretty passive, but for me, it's amazing. I mean, it's basically a social media platform, but it's also a piece of software that's enabling creators with some of the most imaginative editing tools out there, which for me is mind-blowing. So yeah, coming from a filmic background, seeing something like TikTok blow up it's astonishing for me. It's people going wild with great tech that that 10 years ago was super expensive, and now it's completely free and you can download on your phone. And we're seeing the results of that, and it's pretty beautiful. I see you probably saw the Cranberry, the Ocean Spray guy singing Fleetwood Mac. That guy made probably the most successful ad of the year, whether it was for Ocean Spray or it actually brought Fleetwood Mac back to the top 10 and Billboard chart. So he did an ad for Ocean Spray and Fleetwood Mac that was more successful than any ad that has come out of an ad agency this year. And it was done by a guy who used TikTok correctly and did this long shot while perfectly lip syncing a song, which is for me film. I mean, it's not a film, but it's definitely film. It's film language that fills you with feelings about a scene, and he accomplished it perfectly.
So when you say film language, what do you specifically refer to?
So yeah, I mean, I'm talking about this guy, hoping that everybody saw that.
Mad Dog.
Yeah.
Something.
So that's beautiful. That's film language for starters, because he decided to do it on a single take. The single take, your brain immediately interprets it as great craftsmanship, because even though you're seeing this guy lip sync, your brain is saying, hey, he did that on a single take while being on a skateboard. That's pretty impressive. So you might not be immediately thinking that, but it's definitely communicating that. And that's film language.
Something that just, the Steadicam, kind of a marvelous piece of technology that is now kind of available to a lot of people. It's worked itself in the subconscious of people.
Precisely.
Oh, very interesting. So I was also hoping that you could share some of your previous work.
Sure. I've got some stuff here, stuff that I've done in the past. It's some of the stuff that I'm most proud of. Some of it's a little bit old. This first one is kind of my big break in advertising. This was back in, I guess, 2009, I think. And we did this collection campaign for the Red Cross back in Mexico, in which our idea was to show like this coin-operated rides with scenes from the Red Cross and how when you put a coin in them, they keep moving, which is kind of a very simple but very successful visual metaphor. And we did this on print ads, which were all around the city, but we also did it with, a TV spot, and most importantly, we did like real life kiddie rides. So we had like a Red Cross ambulance, a Red Cross boat, and a Red Cross helicopter, and we put them in parks all around the city, and people would be able to, well, kids would be able to put a coin in them and ride them as coin-operated rides, which was pretty successful at the time.
Mm-hmm. There is a, yeah, there we go.
Oh. So yeah, that copywriting is with your help, we can keep moving forward.
Awesome. So this, we've been talking about Medium. This had, perhaps it wasn't a moment where, we had more media spaces. This is a print TV, print film combo.
Yeah, this is what we in the advertising industry refer to as a 360 campaign, which is when you want to be absolutely everywhere. And you would need to think of a concept that's big enough to flourish on TV, radio, online video, now social media posts, which it's like the meat and potatoes of the digital world and all that. So yeah, this would be a 360 campaign.
Could you describe a little bit more about, if you go up one slide to the print ad, one more, there we go. We will be in the next week or two creating a hypothetical ad.
Mm-hmm.
Could you describe to us from beginning to end kind of what the process to doing something like this is?
Of course, I'm gonna do some of the talk that probably an art director should be doing and would probably give me shit for doing it incorrectly, but I'll do my best. So by this point, we already had the idea, which was creating this coin-operated rights.
But before you talk about that, even coming up with the idea is super important, I think.
Coming up with the idea, okay, let me backtrack then. You normally want to come up with what's called an insight in advertising. And an insight is that thing that connects a piece with an audience. That moment where people say, I like, you know when you're watching a TV spot or something and you feel connected to it and you go like, yeah, I either need that or I get that joke, or that connection is what we normally call an insight. It's what makes the idea come through in an emotional way. I'm thinking of this nationwide ad I saw last night with a guy dressed as a cell phone by the Statue of Liberty because he's on a nationwide ad, and suddenly he gets wet and he jumps into a giant bag of rice. And that's a funny joke because you get it. That's the insight. It's, oh, I didn't expect to see a guy dressed as a cell phone jumping into a giant bag of rice. But the reason that that joke works is because the bag of rice is insightful. You get it without having to explain it.
We've all been in that situation. Yeah. Hopefully not, but
you know it. I mean, you don't need to ask yourself, what does rice have to do with this? It's part of our culture. So that's the tiny elements that make an idea insightful. In here was a very basic thing, which is when it comes to coin-operated rights, which is like an icon that everyone's familiar with, money equals movement. And we need like for the Red Cross to keep moving. That was probably our like aha moment while thinking of the idea. It was like this very simple, very universal way to show, hey, your money helps us keep going. So that was kind of the first part. And we had to translate this to the TV spot you just saw and the sprint ads. And it was pretty seamless. It was pretty easy to get here. There's stuff that you need to take into account. You want this to look, there's many ways to go through this, but we wanted this to look like very authentic. So we went to the source. We went to someone who actually builds kit-operated rides and had them build this for real. So you look at the paramedics, they look a little bit rough around the edges, but that's the way the actual person built them, and that makes it more. When you read it, it makes the read more immediate.
Yeah. So that's super important here for us because we will be hopefully creating something very unique, applicable in every discipline imaginable. I think your craft, and you're mentioning these very subtle things that we probably don't notice, right?
All those subtle things, what they do is they take your audience by the hand and guide it through the idea in a very subtle way. It's because of course it's important for the thing to look good, but you also need to like do this hand holding and make sure that you're walking your audience through this message. So for example, in this case, instead of using like this like very crude like sculptures, we would have done like pretty beautiful sculptures. There would have been a dissonance because people have never seen a coin operated ride made like with very like clean sculpturing or textures. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And of course you would need to avoid it. So yeah, all those elements are really important, and normally people like you kind of instinctively land on those.
So perhaps Victor Rojas, who's not here,
he was the art director on this.
He probably did a Photoshop to kind of visualize this before you even.
Yeah, the first thing we did was kind of a mood board in which we would go online or go outside and take pictures of how we feel this should feel and look. And then based on that mood board, he would go on Photoshop and come up something up. And then of course it's a whole layout. When you're building something like this, the layout is basically how you position everything. And again, it's something that feels pretty instinctive, but sometimes you see ads out there that don't accomplish this properly. But yeah, it's basically Western reading, right? You start at the top left and you go left to right and up, down. So you have to take that into account so that the message works properly. For example, in this case, we definitely wanted for people to look at the image first and then read the copy. So that's why the copy is down on the right side corner. That's the last thing we want to see. So the message is ideally coin-operated rides, then copy. But that's not always the case. You might have an idea in which you need people to read something first and then look at an image. So that all dictates your layout. There's a narrative going on here. It's not, when you're doing a print ad, it's not expected that you take the whole thing as a whole. There's a narrative, there's a timeline. In this case, you could pretty easily draw it from the image to the copy as a diagonal line. So I think that's something important to take into account.
In a way, it follows a very similar principle than film, right? There's a beginning, a middle, and an end.
That's a very, very useful
I always
comparison.
mention film, even though we're doing, design or print. There's always something has to have a logic, right? A narrative logic.
Exactly. There's storytelling. There's narrative. I think narrative is a key word. All this is telling stories, small stories or big stories, but it's always a story.
Beautiful. And so then this, you comped it up, you photoshopped it, it was approved. What do you do next?
It goes out in the world like a baby, and you hope he does good.
Good. Awesome. Beautiful piece.
This is an interesting one. This is a job we did for Energizer. So this was back in 2010, I think. As you can probably guess, battery companies are not doing great. Each day there's least and least things that need batteries to recharge everything. So Energizer found itself on a pickle, and we kind of needed to solve that. And research showed that what people were buying batteries for the most was for video game controllers. So this was way back when Nintendo had Wii, and I don't remember which generation of PlayStation and Xbox were around, but all three of them still needed like AA batteries or AAA batteries on their controllers. So we wanted to show how with Energizer Lithium, you only need a couple of batteries to get through any game. So this right now that looks like really weird on your screen, again, is an example of how the medium kind of dictates the idea. We knew for sure that this was mainly an outdoor campaign. And back in Mexico City, you have like this like giant billboards that are basically street level. So you're walking around the subway or stuff, and there's like this house or empty like space, and it's covered with, they call them vallas, but it's basically humongous print ads on the street that people can actually stop and read. And we knew that most of the media buy would be some of those. So that would allow us to do something like this, which would make no sense on a screen or on a magazine. Because what you see here is, so what we did is we hired this engineer who rigged the controllers for us. So they would record all the buttons that you press when you're playing a game. And then we had 3 gamers come in and finish a game on a single play. So they would grab Mario Galaxy and play it from start to finish. And it would take like 9 to 12 hours of continuous playing with the same controller. So this program would capture all the buttons that they would need to press. And that's what you see on the ad. It's basically the sequence of buttons that you need to press to finish a game. And the message is, hey, you can do all this with just a pair of Energizer batteries without needing to change them. And we, for real, used the same pair for all 3 games. We finished Mario Galaxy, and I don't remember. We did a PlayStation 1 and an Xbox 1.
I'm always, thinking back when I worked in advertising and when you told me the story about this, it is almost as if you have something impossible to achieve, right? It seems like a crazy idea. I'm going to record all the moves necessary to complete a game. Can you tell us about the unknown, right? There's like an unknown factor when you come up with these ideas and you kind of have to see it through and deliver something.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. With a lot of,
I mention it because sometimes as students we have no money, we are limited in resources. Zoom. I mean, COVID has decimated our ability to be in a studio, but I feel like there's still this ability to do something very creative and amazing.
I think for sure. I think we live on a day and age where everything really seems possible. Like every idea, it doesn't matter how wild it sounds, seems possible. And I can for sure think that most of the most frustrating moments in my career are when I think I have an idea that's just impossible to do. And then a month later or a year later, you see someone else who did it. Because right now we're at a point where technology is so advanced, and at the same time, the cheapest that it's ever been, that it feels like really when it comes to creating, it feels pretty limitless. I mean, it sounds corny, but I think it is. Everyone here has a phone. Everyone here, it means that everyone here has the ability to shoot something and post it online. So basically, it's all inside of us, what we want to say and how we want to say it. But the tools are there, so yeah, there's no stopping you.
No excuse.
And there's people out there who are as hungry as you are, and if you share an idea with them, they might have that talent that you're missing to bring it to life, and being able to connect with them and bring it to life is also something that tech has allowed, and that COVID shouldn't stop.
Awesome.
So here's one of the last works I did while at LatinWorks, which I'm also very proud of. I'm just gonna play it.
I'm not sure there is audio.
Really?
Hold on. Is there any way you could, well, I guess we'll play it.
I mean, it's mostly a guy talking, so.
Maybe the closed captioning
works.
Oh, YouTube is a little bit.
Can you hear it, or?
No. Well, we'll see. We see the caption thing.
Okay.
Imagine a very old man speaking or narrating.
Precisely. So yeah, this is a project that's really close to my heart, and it's a great example of a little bit of what we were talking right now. We had this brand called Music Has No Enemies that basically gives music to people that need it. Like if you have a nonprofit for cancer and you need music for an event or for a TV spot, this company will provide it to you for free, which is a very nice service. And they wanted to do something, but they had zero money. And we had a ton of ideas lying around, and then someone in our team came up with this story, which is a real story in this subject. And they say, hey, and they basically had the script of this thing that you just saw, which is based on his story. So there were two hurdles. The first one was if Jack, who's this great man, would not appear in the ad, the ad would not be strong. So the first thing is to get him and make sure that he's able to be part of this project, and when we can film him. So that was the very first part and the very most important part. The second one was we had zero money to do a reenactment. I mean, there was no way we could go out and recreate the scene with actors in a setting with World War II clothes and ammo. There was no way we could do it on a successful manner. We, of course, reached out to production companies who were very excited about the story and were willing to do it for almost free, but they didn't have the resources to pull it off. And even with people working just because they love an idea, you have to be realistic and say, hey, even if we try to do this with actors, the fact that we don't have much money would probably hurt the story, and you need to work your way around it. And the way we decided to do so was doing this like small miniature setting, which ended up being a very nice way to bring the story to life. That allows us to use 0 actors and not having to pay anyone for acting. And it also brought the story to life very beautifully. It ended up being a very easy way to do it because it's not animation, which is also very expensive and time consuming. And most of the story is told by the camera, whether the camera is still or whether the camera is moving or where the camera is doing rack focus. So again, it's all movie language here. And that helped us tell the story in the most cheap but efficient way possible.
Awesome. And I think we have one more. Oh.
Nope, that's all I have.
Cool.
It's the screen share.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Rodrigo? They're a super quiet group.
Aren't we all? I never ask anything when I'm the listener in one of these things.
Sure, there's always one person. There's always one person. Is there anything that you could advise students at this stage in their lives? What would you told yourself?
Well, back when I was in college, the only way to get my fit in an advertising agency was having a portfolio, and the only way of realistically getting a portfolio was building one in school or taking some advertising classes, like you probably know the Miami Ad School or stuff like that, who promise you, hey, you'll live here with some great work. That was kind of a bummer, and I think that nowadays students do not have that hurdle necessary. If you guys are interested in advertising, like I mentioned before, you have all the tools at your disposal to start creating some spec work. Look at the advertising you love, analyze why you love it, and then try to do something on your own, and start building a portfolio on your own. I think you guys have all the tools out there, and you don't necessarily need an extra school that will help you build a portfolio.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the work that you showed, but perhaps we didn't see some of the Marvin music commercials, but they come from a particular interest, right? Your sort of interest in pop culture.
Yeah. So yeah, for many years, I wrote music and film criticism for this Mexican music magazine, and they kind of became our client, and I was lucky enough to be able to make advertising for them. So that was a pretty lucky situation in which I was able to do work for the stuff I love the most.
But that's sort of an active thing, right?
For sure.
School can be a miserable place, but you kind of have to make it work for yourself.
Yeah.
So I would recommend everybody to, I think Rodrigo told me, because I didn't have a advertising background when I started working. He mentioned, I asked him like, what should I study? Like, are there books on advertising? And then he said, no, just watch movies. Right?
Just watch movies. Learn the language. Watch movies. Be online. Analyze why you like what you like. What makes it work.
I think that's solid advice. Awesome. Well, any final questions for Rodrigo? Nope. Well, thank you very much for being here with us and sharing with us some of your work.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure. It was really fun. Hopefully I didn't bore anyone to tears or anything.
And I think I see a few smiles here. Awesome. Well, thank you, Rodrigo. Have a
Thank you,
beautiful
guys.
weekend.
Have a nice
Everybody,
weekend.
stay here for a second.
Go boat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you very much, guys, for being here. Hopefully this gives you some context as to the next 2 weeks of school. I will be seeing you live next week. I know Recharge Day is Tuesday. So for those students, I will have to do a Zoom meeting with you guys on Thursday. Does that make sense? Horrible, 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 but it is what it is. All right, thank you guys. Enjoy the weekend. See you next week.
Bye.